Welcome to Higher Intelligence, smart takes on AI for next-generation campuses. I'm JC Bonilla, EdTech Executive, Data Scientist, and Educator. Each week, we cut through the noise and decode what actually matters for your institution. So this is AI Explained for higher ed, colleges, and universities. Let's get into it. Here's a question that is haunting every CIO, provost, faculty member, administrator, and even executives like me. How do you trust something that is never 100% right? Let me say that again. How do you trust something that is never 100% right? At the same time, we're making incredible progress on this fear factor of hallucinations. Hallucination rates are down significantly from the past 2 years. The best models no longer fabricate facts. If anything, they're now fabricating things at almost at 1%. But here's a paradox. As technology increases and we see these trust metrics becoming better, just trust itself is not catching up. Today, technology, it's getting better, but the perception is being stuck. How do you evaluate something like that? How do you decide that it's safe to deploy? Here's what most people are missing. AI evaluations isn't something new. The concept actually has been around for quite some time. We just need to apply it. So today, I actually buckle up and found the best eval person in the world. That's right, friends. Today, I'm joined by someone who lives at this intersection of evaluation, research, and practice. She's going to help us find the middle ground between what is hype or fear and really show us how do we start thinking about AI evaluations, which is something that is going to ground the conversation, a system that is perfectly imperfect. So with that, today I'm joined by Stella Liu, Head of Applied Data Science and AI practitioner and researcher at Arizona State University. Stella works at the intersection of AI evaluation and real-world deployments. Not only just frontier models and benchmarks, but also how do we assess these AI products in productions. She's here to help us demystify what evaluation means, also explain it because many of us, this is a new subject, why it matters, and how higher education, you, our listeners, can move forward from the fear factor to fear of imperfection to what we call in a perfectly imperfect system. Stella, welcome to Higher Intelligence. How you doing?
Doing great, and thank you for having me.
Are you kidding me? It's been exciting. You've been in the Element ecosystem for quite some time. Last year, we had you speaking to our users. We see your work at ASU, so the moment we needed to do a trust evaluation episode, obviously we thought of you. So thank you for being here. Before we go into our conversations and doing news, can we just paint the picture? Because even the news are going to have a factor evaluation. So Stella, when you explain to, I don't know, your parents, your family, your friends, what is it that you do? This thing of evaluations, what's the simple way to explain what Stella does for a living as it relates to evaluations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I usually start by explaining what AI is first. Yeah, and by the way, I did AI literacy for kids program at my local library in January, and I started with that question. So now I have the answer that I can share here with you all. So AI, again, like very high level, AI is machine that are good at making guesses based on data. So starting from there, so AI is basically making guesses based on the information or the data that it learned from the past. Just as what you said, just say perfectly that this is a imperfect system, but it's also a very powerful system. So then the questions comes like, with this imperfect system, how do we make the best use of it? If it is making guesses all the time, when shall we trust it and when shall we not? And what is this system good for and what is not good for? And that is what we're trying to measure and trying to better understand with AI evaluations.
You and I come from a world that not long ago it's AI was called data science, and we can do the whole thing, what is AI and what is data science and whatnot. But one of the important things that we're going to bring to this conversation is we can quickly go into the stats and probabilistic aspect of it. But for everybody who was trained or converted into the world of predictive analytics, right, there's something about evaluations that is different. In today's conversation and also in the news, we're going to come and unpack it, right? That we spoke about accuracy as something very finite. You're 92% accurate. You're 55% accurate. R square, if you actually remember some stats, or now if you're more sophisticated, we spoke about F scores and performance and recalls. This world, it's different. And the part that I liked about your defining AI through the lens of a 6-year-old or children, it's about making guesses. And guesses are probabilistic in nature, right? So I think it's that. So we're going to be talking about evaluations through the lens of probability, if you will, as opposed to deterministic models that if the answer is 5, and if you didn't get 5, then actually it's wrong. So lovely conversation. Everybody, this is one of those recordings that I'm so excited about because it's so core to what we do today, and we experience this trust, hallucination, errors, eval mode in our daily consumption of AI. So get excited. And again, Stella, super happy to have you here. I want to jump to 2 stories that shape our conversation. It's one of them is what everyone is talking about, and the other one is literally how we've ground the conversation on evaluation. So what everyone is talking about is OpenClaw, formerly known as CloudBot. Then it went into MallBot, and it's all these legal aspects of names and what can be supported. So today it's known as OpenClaw. This has been the viral agent. Today we're seeing more than 145,000 GitHub starts, more than 20,000 forks. That means that a lot of developers are using the base code and deploying it on local personal instances. Why? Because this is an open AI agent that not a lot of people are trying to use. This is different to some of the work that we saw from Meta, specifically Meta Manus, that was the probably most interesting open source LLM deployment that we had. Why? Because as an open source, it is deployed on your local machine. It takes over your device, manages your emails, handles calendars, browsers, your home devices. It becomes very persistent and on your face, if you will, right? As an open source, it stays local, and it's also LLM backed, meaning it can go into ChatGPT, OpenAI models, Claude, Anthropic, or even smaller local models. The growth has been explosive, and it's become a really interesting thing for people to experiment. Before we go to you and your take, Stella, researchers in security are not happy about this, and you probably have seen the aspect of these open-close scanners that allow users to understand if there's an agent actually sending data out. There's been some strange things that we've been seeing in terms of prompt injection or data exfiltrations. So it's important to know that as these software and these very interesting things are being used, they're on answers and open questions of how safe it is through the lens of cybersecurity. So Stella, I mean, you're an expert in evaluations. You also understand the world of data science really well. You understand software in drops like this. Where do you start assessing something like this? I mean, what do you make of OpenClaw and the vibe and the excitement that it has?
I'm also very excited with OpenClaw and also CloudBot or MoBot, whatever we want to call it. But because I work on AI eval, so I'm naturally more skeptical, maybe that's the right word, when it comes to news like this. And my first thought when seeing that in the news was this could only happen with open source apps or with startups. Can you imagine like established companies like Meta or I don't know, like Google or ByteDance doing something like that, like releasing it first and see how it goes, or someone in our world in education or in other regulated industries like legal, healthcare, like finance or accounting. Can anyone in that world doing something like this? I think the answer is no. So again, I think the back to your question, I think it is always a trade-off that we're trying to balance between convenience and security. And we need to, like for every different use cases, we're trying to find that sweet spot, like how much we want to sacrifice security for convenience. And that sometimes is an unanswered questions.
And from your sense of convenience, can you say more about how you see in this? I particularly see the convenience factor, to use your terminology, in Open Cloud with use case end-to-end deployment, right? So think about the most advanced agentic frameworks. In my opinion, Claude Cowork allows me to go end-to-end, but these agents have boundaries. They're not allowed to basically jump lanes that have not been hard coded. So the use case that really caught my eye is go fetch a reservation in a restaurant. So OpenCloud learns that there's an API where you can connect to the restaurant, and the API kind of says it's booked. It also figures out, and this is where it jumps lanes, it figures out that there's a phone line. How do I make a phone call and get my way through the reservation system? So it goes into another API service. 11 Labs creates a voice agent, creates a script, has the conversation with the booking human, gets the reservation, scores, and then delivers. What is happening there is that in the end-to-end agentic workflow, it knows that I have a goal, right? Get the reservation. It knows that there's context in memory. The user doesn't mind using voice agents and things of that sort. And then it planned, of course, with actions and skills. So that's the convenience factor that I'm talking about, that allows this technology to accomplish true agentic goals, memory, context, and planning that I thought is interesting. What about you? When you say convenience, what does your head go?
Yeah, I want to go back to the example you just gave. So that use case you just described, Jesse, that is, I would say, a low stake use case. And for that type of use cases, I would say, yes, use agentic AI as much as you want. And what's the worst outcome from that? I feel to reserve a restaurant. I may be upset, but that is okay. I can take it. But there are also many.
In New York City, in New York City where I live, some reservations are actually worth high stakes. So it depends on the restaurant.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say how much emotionally invested you are with that use case.
Fair.
Yeah, but there are also for example, education or higher ed that we are working in. Like when you're interacting with students, there are actually many risk scenarios that we do want to be very careful with.
What are you thinking about, for example? Is it like FERPA or access in grades? I know this student could be at risk. So can you give me one example of where you think, oh my gosh, that's a big no-no? Or is high stakes?
So I would say when we talk about safety, security, or trust in higher education, there are, I would say, three main themes. So one is PIA data. How do we handle student data? Mm-hmm. And secondly, I would say it is risks related to jailbreak or prompt injection. And that has also been discussed a lot. I would say the third theme is related to content moderation. What do we do with those? For example, it is possible that a student struggles academically, struggles with a course, and in some extreme cases may have some mental wellness issues or may express suicidal thoughts when interacting with a chatbot or with an AI. And what do we do with that? I would say in most cases, there are already policies or SOPs established at universities or at schools to address that. But those were human operational processes. But now with agentic AI, what is our expectation with those AI products and AI systems? And also how do we integrate these AI systems with the existing human processes think that has been a challenge.
This is a good segue to where these challenges stem, right? So the other story that I wanted to unpack, it's what we're starting to see in 2026 as it relates to hallucination rates. And I want to go back to prompt injection and some of the cybersecurity issues. But what we've been seeing is the AI paradox of 26 is that the technology is getting dramatically better, but trust hasn't caught up. And your point is very well taken. Hey, there are high stakes issues, mental health, FERPA, PII data, where we know there are protocols and it's important to keep track of it. So one of the things that caught my eye, for example, and just to mention one, Grok for one drops and it reduces hallucination rates from 12 to 4%. That's a 65% increase in performance, right? Best models, right? Frontier models are fabricating less facts over and over. That's 15 to 20% down from the past 2 years. So the technology is getting there. The trust factor is getting there. So let me add a third dimension. Sure, PI data is super difficult to handle. Situations, as you mentioned, right, high stakes through emotional well-being, suicidal thoughts. That's so hard. So here's a controversial take, and I'd like for you to comment on this, right, from your point of view as Stella, the human, but also the professional. I believe that we humans are very irrational, and that's what makes us very cool individuals, humans, right? And our pattern aspects are exposed to recency bias and all these things that all of a sudden what I recommend to Bobby, who is going through a really, really difficult crisis, may be different today than what could be a month from now, because the intervention, it's not 100% scientific, right? Another low stakes, maybe middle evaluations of admissibility. I find that when I read an application, it's one of the use cases that are used, right? So when I read it, if I do a second read or a third read, also like you get this human voting system to get a more objective read. Technology is much better at patterns, but something happens when technology makes mistakes that we're very unforgiving. And I see this for the first time. I saw this on autonomous driving, where Teslas, right, start making mistakes. Unfortunately, there's fatalities, and worst technology ever. Take them off the street. Autonomous driving doesn't have room in this ecosystem. But then I look at the counter, which is us driving, and the amount of fatalities that we introduce in roads, it's, I don't know, dramatically worse. So back to the conversation, how do you balance all these? The aspect of trust, the aspect of high stakes, knowing that technology at its best is much better at patterns than us humans. So Stella, big loaded question, but where does your head go with all this?
When you mentioned self-driving cars, I live in Phoenix and we see a lot of self-driving cars here. And it just reminded me of news that I read about back in January. There was a Waymo that drove onto the light rail track with a passenger in the back seat. And the passenger apparently panicked. It was caught on video. The passenger just jumped off the car. And going back to your question, I think with AI, although, yes, the technology is getting better every day, and the hallucination rate of frontier models dropped significantly, and now, say, is claimed to be at the 1% level. But I think it is not just the percentage that we care about when we talk about trust in those AI systems. It's also about explainability. It's whenever AI makes a mistake, like as humans, we want to know, why did you make this mistake? Or even in many circumstances, it's like, I'm not even sure if AI made a mistake. For example, in the application example you just gave, say AI turned down this application. It is hard for us as humans to know whether it really made a mistake or it observed a pattern that I failed to notice. So it's also a lot of that. I would say I'm still optimistic, although I don't consider myself as in the hype camp of AI. I'm still optimistic in the way that I believe that technology is a powerful tool for us. And if we can combine human intelligence with artificial intelligence, we can achieve much better performance. But I'm again, like for all the things, all the reasons that we discussed above, like explainability, and also there are many other things that AI might not be aware of, but we as humans are able to capture. There is a world I see where the two can come together and make better and more well-rounded decisions.
On our conversation, and now we're going to move into the section of evaluation. So as a precursor, you mentioned something that really caught my eye, and I'm using today a lot on our notes, right? So we need to be communicating using an perfectly imperfect approach, right, to non-technical people. But I think that applies to all of us. So what does that mean in your head, right? Explainability and basically model interpretation, it's really important. Opening that black box that sometimes we don't understand how AI or technology has done something, and having the opportunity to pinpoint how and why, right? So at its very core, this is what is happening in explainability. But you have this balance of perfectly imperfect. Say more. What does that mean? And as someone who is technical but also a human, what does that mean?
I think one fact that we, as people who work in AI, talks a lot about, but maybe people outside the world of AI don't talk a lot about, is that AI is, or in other words, no one in this world today is able to explain why generative AI works.
I mean, we should just end the show here, right? 100%. I'm going to let you go, but that's a really important point that you just mentioned, right? When we say we're experts on a subject, specifically AI and whatnot, what we know is that there is a lot of unknowns in how the why and the how has taken place. So just wanted to emphasize that. Please keep on going.
Yes. And I mentioned that because this is a black box. It's not because it's too complicated or sophisticated that we are, or it's challenging for us to understand it. It's the technology itself. In a way, it just magically works. So there's a lot that we cannot explain with AI behavior patterns. So the example I just gave, like if it turned on an application, the students will want to know why. But it's very difficult for us to explain. We can try to make sense of it, but it's also just our guesses. So I also want to draw the difference between the frontier models, like the generative AI models, and also the AI products, or like the products that are built on top of those frontier models. There are distinct differences. So when we say like the models are black boxes, and the products we build are built on top of those black boxes. So imagine there's a component in this system that we're just not able to explain. Then when we design a product, we want to be especially careful. For example, if explainability, again, going back to the application example, if explainability is super important to a use case, do you want to fully rely on AI to make that decision for you? Or do you want to design a process where you use AI to aid human decision-making and having the final decision given to human instead of AI?
So let me just rewind a few things that you said. So you're talking about their modality. You're also talking about how we should be considering what good or not so good, aka evaluation, right, through the lens of frontier models, the big chat GPT, the big open AIs and Claude, Gemini, whatever you're using today and you're fans with, to how kind of endpoint solutions and services may rely on these other models, calibrate and deploy a service. Two different things. And coming back to your first point, depending on the use case, you can trust it. You can like go fully blind on AI or not. Is that right? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, or if maybe we're getting a little technical into the technical details here, it is similar to, I would say, develop or design any software systems. it comes like this generative AI technology. We know it is not perfect, and it's not new to us. Actually, in the past, many technologies that we use today are not perfect, but we're still using them. So I think the question that we are asking, or the important question that we should ask is, what is our tolerance? And what are the scenarios that there's zero tolerance?
Give me an example of both. Where do you see tolerance and where do you see zero tolerance?
So zero tolerance, for example, like data leakage, PII data leakage, I would say that is a zero tolerance. So in that case, we probably don't want to just use a thin layer of generative AI to control all that. You want to be more careful when designing your system to make sure that it's not there's more like safety checks before fetching the PII data per se. And there are also scenarios that we can tolerate some inaccuracy. Let's take an example in education. So let's say we have this tutor bot that is using generative AI as the engine. And let's say this tutor bot is, the responsibility of this tutor bot is to answer questions from students regarding the class. Let's say if it is a biology class. And the accuracy, we know the accuracy of this tutor bot is not going to be 100%. So occasionally it will give irrelevant or even inaccurate answer to students. That is given.
So for everyone listening to this conversation, your head may be going to two places. So and I think we can have fun and it be useful moving forward. Your head may be going to, well, it's exciting. I get it and I understand. If I need to work with the technology, right? And there's going to be places where it does better or worse, high stake cases, personal information, and things of that sort, right? Or your head is going like, oh my gosh, so these things are not going to make progress, right? Because, everything for me is PII data and everything, even personalization. If you really think I score, sending an email to someone for an event will be relying on PII data. So from the top, Stella, what is AI evaluations with all these things? So if I can just take you back, like what does it mean to do an AI evaluation, knowing that you have LLM models that are very sophisticated, that are probabilistic in nature, that you have endpoint solutions that rely on them, and then you can do certain things. And you also have another dimension that you say they're high stake use cases and there's range there. So it seems that evaluation is a very interesting construct of how do I look at this whole layer of where the technology is and how it gets applied. So what is AI evaluations and how do I start thinking about this?
Yeah. So AI evals is a very new concept. Of course, started after the introduction of ChatGPT. I would say everything that we just talked about, they were more like the use cases of AI evals, or in other words, where and when shall we deploy AI evals? But AI evals, the concept itself, I would say is more like a technique. It is basically similar to the idea of scenario-based testing. It is a technique, it is a tool or methodology that we use to probe the behaviors of AI products or AI models. I know this is very high level.
Let me give you 3 examples and you tell me where is evaluation taking place. So yesterday I worked with one of my prompts and I got the answer, but it's just like the format was super off. Like, what the hell are you thinking, Claude? Why are you giving me that output that doesn't make sense? So I'm going to let you respond. Is that an evaluation where this thing is going wrong or not? Second example, I've connected all these knowledge bases to my chatbot, but somehow I cannot get it right to say the things in the order and prioritize the knowledge sources. And I'm getting there, but it just doesn't seem right. Third example, it just made shit up. It fabricated a reference and it spoke my language. It made it sound very JC-like, but embedded there was something that was fictitious. Are these three examples of AI evaluations or not?
So those three are great examples of where we should do AI evaluations. Again, AI evaluations, the purpose of doing AI evaluations is just the same as why we do software testing for software products or software systems. Basically, it is verification and validation of the product that we're building. And AI evals, we have been doing software testing for decades. And why is this new AI evals concept? It is because generative AI softwares or products are different from traditional software products for the reason that we discussed, because it's probabilistic, because it is non-deterministic. So in software testing, again, like both software testing and AI evals, is to help us to verify and validate whether we're building the product right, and also whether we're building the right product. But there are also a lot of differences between traditional software testing and AI evaluations. With traditional software testing, what we're testing is, in most cases, the logic we write in the code. For example, like for this, like user takes a sequence of actions and is expected to see a certain result. In software testing, we test that user path and we test if the user does see what they expect to see. And it's usually like, say, we make one use case, we make one test case to cover that scenario. But it's very different with generative AI, because generative AI, as the name suggests, is generative, meaning it can behave slightly differently even if you feed the exact same inputs to it multiple times. So to cover one scenario, you need to build up multiple test cases, or what we call scenarios. For example, again, if this is a chatbot and I'm asking it a question of, help me check the status of my order. And I can have slightly different variations of the same question. And when I send all those questions to the chatbots, I can get slightly different or very different responses from the chatbots. In some cases, it may be able to pull the correct answer and give me the status update. But there might be some cases where it failed to address my question correctly or give me a wrong answer. So that's the difference between software testing and AI evaluations. In software testing, the outcome of those testing is usually very straightforward. It's usually binary. You either pass or fail. But with generative AI product, with generative AI, you can be like 95% pass, or you pass like 99.9% of the time. You can get as close to 100% as possible, but you will never get to that 100%. And that makes a lot of decisions, product decisions, and also trust issues with users very challenging for us.
Let me give an example that I hope it lands. But if you're seeing Stella, she looks like a really smart gal. So I'm gonna say that you are a smart student. So in predictive kind of data science vibes, many years ago I would have said your GPA is 4.0, and I'm basically 90% sure that answer, right? So that's deterministic. I'm going to go for a number. Today, these generative models, in a way, they would come and say, I think 95% you're going to be between 3.5 or 4, right? I'm 90% sure of that. Or I think you're an A student, right? Or generative AI, basically, I'll come and say, I think you're just an honors, brilliant student, right? All the answers are right. But the output and the aspect of how it became generative and probabilistic is how it changes. And this is where some of us may struggle that, I need you to give me 4.0. That's the right answer. Do you see it the same way? Is that why this is nuanced?
Yeah, and maybe this is derailing the question that we're discussing. The other challenge that I see with generative AI and with this like maybe say small percentage of inaccuracy or small percentage of hallucination is you don't know when it is going to make a mistake. And I love using the legal AI as an example. Let's say we have a legal AI product and the hallucination rate is now down to, let's say, 0.5%. If it is, but you don't know where it is going to make that 0.5% mistake or error. It could still be fabricating cases that do not exist, but it only happens with like 0.5% of the time. Yes, it is a rare event, but whenever it happens, it can be a big disaster to the lawyer who uses it. I like to compare it with human intelligence. Let's say if we have a, say, paralegal or a junior lawyer, you know that they will make mistakes, but you expect them to make mistakes on more challenging stuff, not at things like making up cases. Yes.
Last question in this section. I want to move to something in the intersect between human emotion and technology. But my last question on the demystifying evaluations. LLM models traditionally are benchmarked against, it passed the SAT score. There's this kind of, benchmark on, software development and whatnot. And one of the things that I'm appreciating from this conversation and everybody listening is that, but when we look at end solutions, pretty much what you're all buying, you look at it differently. So Stella, it's a fair question. Can I ask, hey, what is your AI evaluation metric and how good are you? What is the language that you recommend we use to verify that the technologies that we're getting in our tech stack don't do these crazy things we just mentioned?
Yes, we should definitely always ask our vendors how they do their evaluations, how they evaluate their own products. And in some cases, the vendor may come back say, like, we used this benchmark and that benchmark, public benchmark, to evaluate our tools. I would say that is a big red flag.
Red flag, because that belongs to the big LLMs. That belongs to the Geminis, to the Anthropics. Is that why?
That is part of the reason why. Like, again, like we are using the AI product, which is not just the model itself. So you need to evaluate the whole product, not just the model. That is one big reason. And the other reason is data leakage, or what we call benchmark data contamination issue in our area. Like any open benchmark data set that you can find online, I can guarantee you that they are in the training data set of those frontier models. So it's like the models already memorized those benchmark. They almost like they are cheating if you're using the same benchmark data sets to evaluate them.
Let me give you 3 scenarios, and if you know something practical, love to hear your thoughts. I'm evaluating chatbots. What are good things that a vendor can come and tell me this is how they benchmark it against themselves? I'm evaluating personalization, kind of like marketing at scale. It creates campaigns and things of that sort. What is a good one? And I'm trying to think of another consumption that is... Actually, stay with those 2 examples that are very core to higher education. So chatbots or personalization, marketing, communications type of tools.
Yeah, so for those vendors, if they already have clients, and if they can share the actual business impacts they make with their previous clients, and then I would say that is the strongest signal. But if for some reason they cannot share that data, or if they are a relatively new company going to AI, then a good strategy is to, like, if you're willing to, you can partner with them and test the product, use your own data. For example, like student-facing chatbots. You probably already have data collected from the past of like what type of questions student would ask. And that would be a good seed data to use to test the vendor solution.
Is that what you refer to as scenario testing?
Yeah, that would be scenario testing.
Love that. I was paying attention, Stella. I want to move you to this middle ground between what AI evaluations is to one of the things that, as a sector, higher education, we're really struggling with, which is the fear factor, right? I either put people in higher education in two camps: hype campus or fear campus, right? And it's something is happening in higher education, and the people that you work with, that I work with as well, that we're more susceptible to the fear side. Hallucinations, academic integrity, job displacement, these are real important things that are happening in classrooms, boardrooms, dean's office, and whatnot. From your side, which actually you represent both the research kind of, next frontier, but also you probably attend some of these meetings on campus, right? So how do you navigate these conversations? What is the middle ground, if anything, when I cannot trust this technology, it's going to take my job, or academic integrity, everyone is cheating, students cheat, and overall hallucinations? Middle ground, what does Stella usually do in those situations?
I would say I'm very blessed. I work at Arizona State University, and ASU has been like leading the AI applications in education and higher ed. So I would say
you're definitely in hype side, right? Fear campus.
yeah, I would say for the conversations that I was part of, it would be very rare if someone came and say like, I don't trust AI at all and we shouldn't use them. I think for us, the assumption is we are going to do this, but how do we make sure that we do it right? It's a lot of that conversation. And I think the fear, going back to the fear side, I think a lot of that fear is because generative AI changes everything in education. And there's so much work that we need to do in education or in higher ed to catch up on the development of this technology. And I think the fear is really from that. It's more of the fear of changes, at least from my experience, not necessarily of the fear of the technology itself. And I can give an example here. This is a conversation that I had with a colleague of mine very recently. We were discussing building tutor bots on campus for students. And we're discussing how do we ensure academic integrity when building out those tutor bots. Like how do we make sure that those tutor bots are used to help students to gain knowledge instead of helping them to, say, cheat on homeworks. And then we started to think, okay, so even if we make sure that they don't use the tutor bot we built for cheating, they can use all these other AI tools that are made available to them. And then we come back to say, okay, so what is the real issue here? Is the issue really like using AI for doing homework, or is the issue really why we're asking students to do homework? Like in my view, well, I when I went to school, we didn't have any of those AI tools. So homework or assignments or assessments are a way of forcing ourselves to learn outside the classrooms. But now students have all those tools and they can easily bypass that exercise. And they have very little incentive doing homeworks. But again, the purpose of homework is not doing, we're not doing homework for the sake of doing homework. We want students to do homework to learn. So with AI, the challenge that we are addressing now, is it really how we want to make students to do homework without cheating? Or is there a better way to keep students learning outside the classroom instead of having them doing homework?
That probably, that's so profound, right? Because what we know is, on one side, let's go back to camp fear, is going to take my job. There's something radically wrong with how we approach work. I'm going to pick a profession, accountants. How often, if you look at the percentage of time that you actually do accounting, it's probably not as much as you wanted. You went to school, are you balancing books, or are you scheduling people to review the books? Or are you actually spending more time getting the receipts so you can do the ledger and whatnot? I don't know. there's something of the canonical description of our jobs versus how it gets applied, and that is real. So displacement of what? One of the promises, because I'm technology, you know, very positive towards it, and I embrace it. I cannot wait for AI to be fundamentally present in all jobs, so we can actually do the things that we trained, or we can do it. The counselor actually counseling, the advisor actually advising, and to your point, the teacher, faculty actually teaching. So that brings me to academic integrity. As a faculty member, a lot of the assessments that I gave, number one, I want you to graduate and not embarrass me. So I need to make sure that you pass rigorous calibration, because it's about signaling of I am a good teacher. Number two, a construct of this is what good is. So I need to put you in that box and repetition of it, as opposed to the fundamental aspect of knowledge and how we learn and how do we impart and diffuse knowledge. When we're having those conversations, I think as a society, as workers, we won. And hopefully AI is bringing those there. I don't know. What do you think of this rant?
Yeah, I think there are like two different, how to call it, scenarios that you just described. Like in the educational setting, or like in universities, I'm definitely more like, I would say I'm in the middle between hype or fear, but leaning towards hype when it's in the educational
Come to my camp.
setting.
Come to my camp.
Yes.
I'm all hype.
But JC, you also mentioned the like the social impact that generative AI could bring. And on that topic, I think I'm leaning towards fear. And the fear is not necessarily that I believe generative AI will be able to replace my job completely, but it's also like how the society, or how the corporates view the potentials of generative AI. I know there's also, I worked in tech for over a decade before joining higher ed. And I have my friends talk to me and express their AI fatigue over the past few years. And the AI fatigue could be like, they also work in tech. They can be like developers, data scientists, and when they're doing their job, they're asked to use all the different AI coding tools or non-coding tools to improve their productivity. But you would think, or we would think, that with the productivity increase, we will have more time to spend with our family, or to do things outside work. But that has not been the case. With the productivity gain, there comes more layoffs, and people are doing more work with the productivity gain. So on that topic, I'm leaning towards the latter. I think I'm more still in the middle, but somewhat more fear.
Stella, I need another hour with you in this podcast. I just cannot keep on going there. I'm going to move us on, but I'm really enjoying the conversation, and I think everybody is understanding the nuance of what we've discussed. Two questions that I wanted to get your take on. You brought up a terminology that is so fundamental, simple, but at the same time fundamentally magical. AI analytics. And we discussed this a few weeks ago, and literally my head exploded, because of course AI analytics, right? So before I explain it, what is AI analytics to you? And why is it important that someone who's crossover from, analytics, data science into AI today, you've actually defaulted to AI analytics? Can you describe that? It was very practical.
So in order to explain AI analytics, I want to maybe make a comparison between analytics and also AI evals. So let's start with AI evals. So AI evals is how we test artificial intelligence. But then think about how we test human intelligence. When we were still students, we take tests. Those are standard tests like SAT, GRE, or whatever. And we get a score from those tests. And those scores are signals or predictions of how we would perform in real world. It's similar to AI evals. We do a lot of AI evals before we deploy an AI tool. And all the scenarios that we just talked about, those are like standard tests we designed for AI products. Again, we're doing all the AI evals because we want to make a prediction of how this AI product is going to perform after deployment in production. But still, standard tests are different from real-world challenges, and all the AI evals we do before release is going to be different from what the tool or how the real users are going to use the tool. And that's where the AI analytics come into play. Again, going back to the analogy, after students graduate from school and they enter workforce. Now, say they're working a job at a corporate. They're no longer asked to take standard tests. Instead, they're doing performance reviews with their supervisors. And that is similar to the concept of AI analytics. We're no longer doing standard tests. We're no longer doing AI evaluations, or at least we're not only doing AI evaluations. But in addition to that, let's take a look at how this AI product is performing when it's interacting with real users, how it's performing in production, and what business impacts this tool has made. And that is the role I see of AI analytics with AI products.
You become what you measure, and through the aspect of performance, and it's a beautiful topic. And again, probably another hour for you and I to just unpack that one. Two more questions as we approach in the top of the hour. I've listened to Stella. I'm a convert. I really need to start looking into this idea of evals. I've invested. I look at my tech stack and I see all these AI solutions, CRMs, Element, chatbots, whatever. What's the MVP? How do I start creating a rigorous evaluation program at home so that I know what my tools and my AI tech stack is doing, not doing, and how do I know that it's bulletproof? What's your MVP recommendation for everybody who wants to jump into this boat with their tech stack?
Yeah. So if you are building an AI product yourself, I would recommend first starting from your product requirements document, from your PRD. Map your PRD to eval metrics or to evals requirements. So it's an exercise that you quantize the expectations that you set in PRD. And then going from there, thinking about what are the different user paths or the different use cases or scenarios that you would like to test. You can probably start with the data that you already have and build out small test sets. Start with small test sets. You can even, like, when you start doing it, you can even just start with doing some like manual testing with your test cases and use that to get an idea of how the product is performing. But of course, if you are going to continuously investing in building out that AI product, at some point you will need to invest in automating all those tests. But start small and start from understanding the requirements and the expectations set in the PRD and quantize that. I think that is going to be a powerful and critical first step.
Awesome. And what if I actually bought a technology and I've been using it for a year? I'd never asked these questions about evaluations. How do I know that I don't have a time bomb in front of me that my students or services will be collapsing soon? So what should I do?
Yeah, so if the product is already in production, has been running for a while, then it's never too late to start measuring the business impacts of the solution. So at that point, the focus is probably not doing evals, but to start measuring the gains and the impacts of this solution.
That's a really important framing of a difference between evaluations and business impact, and how connected but different, right? And going back to the perfectly imperfect solution. All right, Stella, this has been fantastic. One more question, really open-ended, but if you could change one thing about how we in higher education approach AI and AI evaluations, what would it be? And we'll close with that.
So that is something, what comes to mind is something that I've been trying to do better in higher ed, is that I think it's because we work closely with researchers or with the academia side. And academia side has a different mentality from, say, us in tech, in industry. It's there's a natural tendency of trying to build out something perfect in the first try. Again, going back to our like perfectly imperfect.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is let's bring in the product management discipline into building out products in higher ed. Let's focus on a small scope first. Let's start small and keep iterating on that. So that is something that I'm trying to do better in higher ed.
That was not a perfectly imperfect answer. That was a perfect answer, Stella Liu. So thank you so much. Let's bring it home.
Thank you.
This week we saw the evaluation change and how it is important, right? At the same time, OpenCloud hits tremendous numbers. Open source agents are doing remarkable things. And security researchers are a little bit worried. Hallucination rates are down, and we're starting to see the industry normalizing what good is and not. What is the through line? AI evaluations. It is a thing, right? But it isn't about finding perfection. It's about defining scope, measuring performance, understanding, what is your technology? Is it a point solution? Is it a product? And what is good enough, right? These are not new concepts. They're being evolving, and they're omnipresent right now for us to be successful. I would say that a mindset shift is crucial. Stop waiting for a magical product that never fails. As you mentioned, Stella, it's about understanding the range and then the aspect of critical and really high stakes situation. But start building systems gracefully that could fail, not fail, scale, and improve continuously is in a way what I'm taking away. So, but probably the line is perfectly imperfect. What it really means, in my opinion, it's not a limitation to fear. It's actually an operating model to embrace of continuous improvement and going at it. So thank you, Stella. Thank you, ASU, for allowing us to expand horizon and borrow some of your thinking. It's been fantastic. So I really want to thank you.
Thank you, JC.
All right, this is all for this week. I'm JC Bonilla, and this has been Hiring Intelligence, smart takes on AI for the next generation campus. Until next time. Thanks for listening to Hiring Intelligence. This show is part of the Enrollify network, home to the largest collection of podcasts in higher education. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. You can find more podcasts, webinars, videos, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe to get new content sent directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the AI agent platform for higher education. Learn more at element451.com.